Good evening and welcome to this week's The Locker Room podcast. We are joined by a very special guest all the way from stateside. Shade, how we going, Shade?
Doing well. How you doing, mate?
I'm good, man. I'm so glad I called you Shade as well. I was looking at your name thinking, right, Shade.
I was like,
And
is
it
he
was.
gonna go Cal? Is he gonna go Cal?
I'm not promising it won't come at some point because I'm just really bad with names.
And there's I've noticed that like people when they tweet at me and stuff like that, they'll put like, "Hey Cal, blah 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 blah," and I'm like, like it's like I feel like I should make a disclaimer. It's SoCal, Southern California.
Do you know what? It took me too long last time. Like it threw me because when you said, "Oh no, that's not my name," I'm like, "Eh? I thought your name was Cal." But no, this is Shade, our guest for the evening. Just like with the coolest name I've ever heard, I'll be honest.
I appreciate that.
But we are here to talk about the important stuff tonight. We are here to talk about mental health, and in particular men's mental health, and the journeys we've been on, and in particular yourself, because I think people are probably sick of hearing about my journey. So we're going to hear about yours tonight, my friends. Did you want to start us off and see how we get on?
Yeah, sounds good. Like I was telling you privately, like I'm really passionate about mental health awareness, and I really like what you're doing in terms of kind of bringing that to the forefront of not just like men's mental health, but more specifically in kind of Newcastle United and football fans alike and stuff like that. Because I was telling you privately as well is I think that there's a much larger conversation going on about mental health awareness nowadays, and I think that that's great. But I think that kind of and that bleeds into so many different facets. And I can only speak from my own experience being the person that I am and being a man and all that stuff. So I won't try to speak for other identities or women or anybody like that. But I do think that men's mental health is something that is being talked about a bit more nowadays. But I think that kind of the last like area that we're looking in is kind of in the sports world and that alpha mentality world. And I think that you get athletes that focus on competition instead of dealing with the stuff going on in their heads, and and that works either well for them or not so well, and eventually ends up not working out well for them. And I think that also in the supporters world, we tend to look for distractions, right? Like because life is hard and life is a lot of pain, and it's a lot of struggle, and we tend to just want to look for some type of escape. And I think that for a lot of football fans, football is that escape. It's that 90 minutes of freedom, right? Like it's that, okay, my job doesn't matter that I hate, or my problems at home don't matter, or just anything that I'm currently going through right now that I don't want to deal with, I can at least turn that off for 90 minutes. And I think that that's why, specifically football and of course other sports, fall into this category as well, but why it means so much to fans in a lot of different ways. And I know that this goes for almost anyone that's a football fan, but like I said, I'll speak from my own experience, and I don't try to assume where other people are coming from in their own journeys and stuff like that. But, so like I'm really, really into what you're doing, and I'm really happy to be here and to kind of talk about, how messed up my life's been.
Mate, it's a recurring thing. Mine's the same. As I said to you, I mean, football is always my escapism. It still is my escapism. It's always that chance every week just to switch off from the real world and watch Newcastle play, which isn't always best for your mental health, but it's what we've been born into. I mean, I've been a fan for 25 years now, so it's never going to change. And it's just always been my opportunity to switch off and reset my mentality for the week and scream at the TV or scream on the sidelines for 90 minutes. And I completely get where you come. I think it's the same for a lot of people, especially up here. Is mental health is still such a taboo subject, and it's still such a difficult thing to get hold of. And as I do a lot of work with the foundation, and obviously we run the Be a Game Changer campaign, and that's using the Newcastle United badge to try and get through to people and say, look, it's okay not to be okay. It's okay to speak up and talk and share your feelings. And it's they've done wonderful work up here, and it's going really strong. And as I say, it's using football as that opening conversation, and it's massive.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And you know, and I'll kind of get more in depth on this later, but you know, football, specifically Newcastle and Newcastle United, you know, played just such a pivotal role in saving me in a lot of ways. And like I said, I'll talk about that in a minute, but it is true. It's like, you know, we either look for distractions or we just bottle things up, and that's really, you know, that bottling up or that avoidance of what's going on inside is essentially what turns into toxicity, right? Or what turns into a problem. You know, it's, you know, maybe sometimes it starts out with you know, just going for a couple of pints with the lads just to forget about your problems, and then before you know it, you're drinking almost every day because you don't want to deal with your problems, and that becomes your kind of dependency, or drugs, or, you know, or a list of other things, because you can become addicted to working out too much, or you know, or massively addicted to football, right? And so, you know, it all just comes down to escapism and not knowing, you know, and a lot of it isn't, you know, we talk about like people don't want to deal with their problems, and I don't necessarily agree with that. I think that we have a society that's conditioned people to not want to not deal with their problems, but to not know how, right? Like it's more ignorance than anything. It's like, you know, like I used to talk about, you know, people walking around every day triggered because they haven't dealt with trauma that they went through when they were younger. And, you know, and we've essentially just created a semi-functioning society of people with unresolved trauma who don't know how to deal with things, trying to coexist around each other. And it's like that is kind of, you know, it doesn't really make sense, does it? Like, when there's just other ways of dealing with things, because we've all got problems, you know, and we've all got unresolved trauma from our childhood, or from our younger years, that bleeds into the, you know, adult versions of ourselves, or, you know, if we're younger, we're going through that right now, and we, you know, it's confusing. And so you know, so I guess like my mental health journey really starts with, you know, my childhood. I had a pretty messed up childhood, a very chaotic childhood, and you know, like I won't get into too many of the specifics, but you know, to kind of lay the foundation of how I came to be the adult that I am is, you know, my parents had me at a very young age, my biological parents, and they didn't want to take care of me because they were still kids, and so my grandparents adopted me when I was a baby. And I'm really grateful for that, because, you know, they've been my parents my entire life. They raised me, they put me through school, you know, put clothes on my shoulders, everything like that. And I'm grateful for that. But my biological parents were still very much a part of my life. And so growing up, I had this really chaotic childhood where I had these two people who were two generations older than me doing the best that they could, right? But also they're two generations removed from what I'm currently going through. So they don't even understand the landscape of being a child in, you know, the early 90s, right? And I'm 34 now, right? So, you know, and the other thing, and, you know, like I said, I have no bad things to say about my grandparents, but the other thing is they, you know, they had already raised three children. So like they were used to having teenagers that kind of just took care of themselves. And then this baby shows up. And then on the flip side of that, you know, my biological father and my biological mother were not together, but they very much wanted me to be a part of their lives. So, but, you know, they were just narcissistic children that didn't know how to raise a child. And so I grew up having to meet their needs a lot. And, you know, and then that bled into, as I got older, becoming a big people pleaser. And that was because my parents didn't know how to meet me where I was, and I had to meet them where they were. And on the flip side of that, I would then go to, you know, and they didn't live great lives. And, you know, my whole family's a working class family, but my grandparents were obviously established in their careers, well off, you know, doing all right for themselves. And they only had me to take care of. So they made sure I was, you know, financially okay. But, you know, they didn't know how to deal with mental health, because my grandfather came from the generation where that didn't exist. You went to war, you came home, you bought a house, you raised your kids, and you put them through college. Like that was it. Right. And so then I had to, you know, be on that side of things where things were kind of structured and kind of less chaotic, and I loved it. But I also like felt weird because I knew that they were my grandparents. And then so that just kind of turned into this perfection complex where at a very young age, I decided, in my, in my childlike brain that I needed to be perfect because there was something wrong with me when I was born. And that's why mommy and daddy didn't want me.
Mm-hmm.
And if I am now perfect, my new parents won't get rid of me. And so that turned into, and like I've gone through years of working on where's the moment that turned me into all of the problems I'm going to have for the next 34 years. And it was that childlike realization, right?
Yeah.
Of I have to be perfect or else these people will get rid of me too. And that puts you in this state of defense where you are constantly trying to make sure everyone around you likes you. And so that started for me at a very young age. And it taught me no boundaries whatsoever. And so I would just kind of do whatever people wanted me to do, as long as I felt like they liked me for it. Right. And so that's really the foundation of what became kind of my mental health journey. So I wanted to lay that out because what you're going to see is, and I think that it's true for almost anyone, what you're going to see is like, we all go through cycles of essentially the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's a wash, rinse, repeat. And the only difference in what you're going through is you're either going through with less experience or more experience. Right. And that's what I've learned. And it took me a long time to learn this. I don't think I started realizing it until I was 26 years old. But, and so like my cycles are, I build up things in the way that I think that they're meant to be. And with this perfection complex that I've created for myself. And then as soon as things don't go the way that my mind imagined them to go, right, I completely self-destruct. And then I don't know how to react to that, right? I'm like, well, no, I did everything the way it was supposed to go. So it should be the way I expect it to be. And it isn't, because that's life, right? That's just the
Mm-hmm.
reality of life. And it took me a long time to be able to swallow that pill because I wanted I wanted structure, right? Like I wanted some form of structure and scheduling in my life. And really what that all is control, right? Like
Yeah.
I grew up in a very unstable childhood, very chaotic, having to go from different houses to different houses, having to spend having, like, people think it's great to have 3 Christmases. It's the worst thing in the world. Like, I mean, not the worst thing in the world. There are plenty of things way worse than 3 Christmases, but like, it's a terrible thing. And you start to get older and you don't want to have to go Christmas Eve at your biological mom's house, Christmas morning at your grandparents' house, Christmas evening at your dad's, right? You don't want to do all those things. You want what you see on TV or what you see on Instagram
Mm-hmm.
of a whole family together, sitting there enjoying presents together and having a meal together and going to sleep and waking up in the same home. And what kid growing up in a society where that's the normalized thing wouldn't want normal? Like every child wants to feel normal because we're so
Mm-hmm.
confused about ourselves, right? And so like I was yearning for that. And so I would create, these ideas in my head, and when they didn't go the way that I wanted them to go, I would just lose it. And I didn't know why I was doing it. And that was a whole other thing was, no one really took the time to notice that, like, this kid is growing up with so much anxiety. Like,
Mm-hmm.
he is constantly trying to be perfect. He doesn't act like a child. He does everything he's told immediately when he's supposed to do it. He rarely misbehaves. And all this is doing, like, yeah, it probably sounds like I was a really great kid to have around because I kept quiet and stayed in my room all the time. But it's like, all this was doing was like setting me up for the biggest explosion of my life. Right. And so, I grew up in that kind of scenario for a very long time. And then when around when I was like 15 or 16, when you start to hit puberty and you start to hate everything and you start to question your reality, things start to change. And I started to, like, I was a very shy person because I didn't have a lot of interpersonal skills, and people think that's crazy now because I'm so talkative, but I couldn't talk to people. I was very much like, I'll just stay in the room and I'll be quiet. And if you notice me, I'll say something that I think you'll like to hear, and maybe you'll like me. And then as long as I keep doing what you expect me to do, you'll like me. And like, that was my mentality going forward, for a very long time in my life. And like, how exhausting is that to
Mm-hmm.
constantly not only lie to yourself, but put up all these masks that you have to wear for every person that you've interacted with. And then you also have no sense of identity because you've essentially adopted all of these identities that that weren't ever yours to begin with because you thought that you had to in order to fit in. And so the first rupture in all of that was I started getting really into punk rock music and being unique, but in that very, very like one-dimensional way where it's like, you see all those punks that all look the same and listen to the same music, and we're individuals, but like really just collectively, you've got your own dogma there, right? And your own uniform. But what was good about punk rock was it taught me rebellion, and it taught me to question things. And so when I turned about 16, I had a girlfriend at the time who broke up with me, and I didn't know how to deal with that because it was entirely my fault, being a dumb 16-year-old boy. And, she just didn't want to deal with my shit. So she dumped me, and I completely lost it. I wasn't, I was having angry outbursts. I didn't understand how to deal with my emotions. My grandparents didn't know how to deal with me. My biological parents especially didn't know how to deal with me. And so the first thing that they did was they put me on antidepressants. And, because that was what you did back then, was like, oh, your kid's sad, we'll give them happy pills instead of really, really talk about what's going on. And like after about 6 months of doing that, like I just felt like a zombie. And I didn't like the way I was feeling. I didn't think that they were doing anything for me. I just felt like kind of just slowed down and medicated. Mm-hmm. And so I remember I like around 16, I actively decided that I just didn't tell my parents. I was like, I'm just going to stop taking them. So they give it to me in the morning. I stopped taking it. And then, and that's not the way to get off those drugs. Definitely either, which we've learned now, right? We didn't know this at the time. I just stopped taking them one day, and I had a complete mental breakdown, like maybe 6 months later. And, and so I tried to kill myself, and took a bunch of pills, drank a bunch of alcohol, and my grandpa found me and had to take me to the hospital. And, and even then, right, because we weren't really looking at that as anything serious. Like I'm assuming it's a lot different nowadays, right? When you go to the hospital, but like, I remember like they were unhappy to treat me there. Mm-hmm. Because they're like, you're wasting a bed because you don't want to live anymore. And I was essentially getting a guilt trip for wanting a way out of the 16 plus years of guilt I had been feeling. And I didn't know how to deal with that, but I also didn't like that everyone was so concerned and upset with me. And then I felt like everyone, like I had done something wrong. So I was like, oh no, it was just an accident. Like I was just being silly, blah, blah, blah. And I took the lecture and I went home. And then 2 months later, I tried to do the same thing again. Mm-hmm. And then they found me. I had to go on suicide watch, all that stuff. And so, I completely shut down after that. Like I didn't want to deal with anything. I dropped out of high school. I just started eating my feelings because I just didn't like myself so much. And I didn't know how to like myself because I felt like anyone that should have liked me while I was growing up didn't. And now I'm just this confused mess. And I felt like I was too dumb to get into college. Like I had no future and all this stuff. And so, I dropped out. I got a job delivering pizza, and I ate my feelings for almost 2 years. And I think you've seen, like I've posted photos of me at 18, 19. I got up to, I think it's 320 pounds. I think it's 23 stone. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, and I just ballooned up and in another, like, when I look back on it now, I didn't really know what I was doing then, but like, when I look back on it now, like, I think in a way I was just trying to kill myself in a different way. Cause I was just so tired of every day not knowing who I was, because I had met the needs of everybody else in my life that I had never taken 5 minutes to understand what I want from my life, what I need from my life, and I think I was trying to escape from some of the dumb choices that I'd made. Like I was never stupid. I was always really good at school. I just didn't want to do it anymore. And so I dropped out, and I was so it's like I just kept adding more disappointment to my life because, maybe without realizing it, I thought that if I become a big enough disappointment, like it just won't matter anymore. And I'm tired of trying to be perfect. And unfortunately at that time, like as much as I didn't want to be alive, like I was, and I would either just eat my feelings or I would take painkillers and numb myself out and go make pizza for minimum wage and then come home. And, and I know it was really hard for my parents to see me like that and have, like, just effectively be somebody at 18 years old having given up on life completely. And that's like, I was doing the bare minimum. And I know that. And so moment in my life where like, I just like want to be like that anymore, but I didn't know what to do about it. And so I had always thought in my life, because I had always grown up chubby and insecure about my weight, and my some of my biological family was just really cruel to me growing up about my weight, because specifically on my father's side of the family, they're all tall and thin, and I was kind of, I inherited my mom's side of the family where I was a little shorter, a little more stocky, and I gained weight really easily. And then I was also on a Mexican diet, which just makes you a big boy. And there was just a lot of things there, and I wasn't happy with myself. And so then I came to my next cycle, right? Where, I thought in high school, if I got the girlfriend and graduated, like life would be okay. And then that all fell apart and I completely lost it. And so then my next cycle was, okay, if I lose weight and I get in shape, people will like me. They won't see all my insecurities. I'll be able to hide them better, and I'll be happy. So then I went on this insane diet, and I started working out like a madman. And I got in. The other thing about me is I have a very addictive personality. So when I get addicted to something, I just go with it. And I didn't know that I didn't know that at the time. And so over like a 2-year span of that, I lost over 100 pounds. I got in really, really good shape. I enrolled in, so like over here in the States, if you don't finish high school, you have to go to community college. And if you do a certain amount of time at community college, you're able to get enough credits to transfer to 4-year university and get your degree. And so I enrolled in community college, and I was doing all that, and I was killing it. Like I was all, I was thin again. I was thin for the first time in my life. I was thin, and I was like, oh, this is good. And, girls were looking at me, and I felt like that was good. And I was, I was hitting the gym. So I was like just around a bunch of meatheads all the time. So I felt like I was more of a man or whatever. And, and all that stuff. And I was doing well in school. And it was around that time, like I ended up transferring to university. I was really proud of myself. My parents were really proud of me, and everyone was so proud of me, right? Because I turned it around, and I was getting so much attention for losing all that weight, for going to school and everything. And I got addicted to that attention, right? Like that, oh, people like me now because now I have something that I can bring to the table. But really, like when I look back on that all, like I wasn't doing any of that for myself. I was going to school to make my parents happy. I was losing weight so girls would like me, and I was hoping that would get me some friends. And, all very materialistic reasons, and all reasons that weren't really true to myself or my happiness. I just was still doing things I thought people wanted me to do. And so go to 4-year university, and the guy on the rugby team talks to me, and he's like, hey, he's like, did you play football in high school? I was like, no. I'm like, I had never played a sport before in my life. And he's like, well, you're in really, really good shape. You should come out and play rugby. It's a really easy sport to pick up, blah, 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 and everything. And I was like, so scared to say no to this dude, because I wanted a friend in college, right? That I went to this training session to go play rugby, and I never played. And so I showed up. I didn't know what I was doing. I just didn't want to look like a fool. But like all these guys were really nice to me. And like I went for like the first couple, and I was like, okay, I don't know how to play this game, but I'm faster than all of these people, and I'm in better shape than all of these people. I was like, so if I can learn how to play, maybe I can actually play this sport. And so then I just became obsessed with rugby, right? And like other than that, the only thing I'd ever been obsessed with prior to playing rugby was like I grew up watching basketball and the Mexican national team growing up, like for football, right, for footy. And that was it. And I just watched that. And the idea of ever playing anything like that was just so alien to me. And because I wanted these people to like me and I wanted friends, I started playing the sport. I fell in love with the sport and got pretty good for that school and everything, and started playing rugby as a first string varsity player for the school. And like I couldn't believe it, and my parents couldn't. Like they're like, shades of college athlete now, like this is insane. And they would come down to my games, and and people would root for me, and like that was a whole different world, and I became addicted to this person that I created for myself when I moved to university, right? And I was the college athlete. I got good grades. I knew how to party like there was no tomorrow, and I was living this like college dream that I'd always envisioned in my life. And in my eyes, for those that year and a half was perfect. Underneath me was this storm of unresolved trauma and insecurity and anxiety was all brewing inside of me. And how I dealt with it was, for 80 minutes, I went on the pitch and I cracked skulls if I could and smashed people. And then I'd go to a party and, talk to girls and just divulge into alcohol and debauchery like you do when you're at uni and give into all these really toxic masculine things. And the only other, male influence in my life other than my grandfather who raised me, who was kind of old school, was my really, really narcissistic, womanizing biological father who was really selfish his whole life and, always had a different girlfriend every time I saw him and, was young and immature. So would make dumb jokes that I forced myself to think were funny because I wanted him to like me. And so all I knew was like, oh yeah, be the party dude and like, and like, doesn't matter. And really all I'm doing by doing all of that. And I think a lot of people don't realize that is like, by not dealing with unresolved trauma, you are effectively taking that out on all the people that love you, whether you realize it or not. Right. And that comes out in many ways, whether you're a raging alcoholic that throws things or hits people, or, you're a drug addict that can't get out of bed, or you're just somebody that makes sure that anyone that loves you and actually looks out for you stays at the safest distance possible to the point where they eventually just don't want to deal with you anymore because they're so tired of playing this game. They know they can't win with you. Right. And so it's all these different things. Right. And so that was what was happening. And so, right, coming up to graduation, like things were going great. We were undefeated. We were going to nationals. I was going to graduate, top of my class, all that stuff. And I'd gotten a girlfriend, and like my next cycle of things aren't going to go the way you want them to, Shade. Really good friend of mine, the guy who actually taught me how to lift weights and was really just an integral part in me becoming the rugby athlete that I was. He died and I didn't know how to deal with that because no one close to me had really ever died, let alone my friend who was 2 years younger than me, who was like the child of our group, the baby brother of our group. And he died in a really awful way. He took a bunch of hallucinogens and, thought he could fly and he jumped off a building. And so like, for a while, like for the first week, we thought he just committed suicide. And then, more information comes out. He was in New York at school. So he was on the other side of the country. And then more information comes out. And we find out that was kind of what happened. And, and like when that hit me, I was like, oh my God. And I was already going through this, like college is about to end. And now I have to go into the real world and be an adult when I've just figured out college life and made it perfect for myself. And so I was already dealing with this anxiety of that next thing that's going to come. Right. And so then this hits me and I was like, oh my God. And then, and then I reacted in a very toxic way and kind of pushed a lot of people away. And my girlfriend at the time couldn't handle some of the dumb choices that I was making, and rightfully so, ended our relationship. And so then that blow completely put me over the edge and I didn't really know what to do. So I was just like, well, you know what, fuck it. Like, I'm just going to enjoy college and then I'm going to figure it out from there. And so my last year of college, I was trying to, I was dealing with all of that. I had applied to a bunch of grad schools in America and England. I had been accepted to a bunch of them, but then I also got like an internship that was going to turn into a job offer in Los Angeles right after I graduated. And, pretty much everyone was like, hold on, like you basically have a job in the field you want to work in set up for right when you graduate. Like, why are you even thinking about grad school? Like, there's no reason to. Like, wouldn't you just go to do the job? And I was like, yeah, I guess you're right. And I remember I listened to my biological father on that advice because he just gives bad advice. And and so I took the internship. I deferred Newcastle University for a year because I've always been somebody that wants to have an escape plan if possible. So instead of just saying no, they gave me the option of deferring for a year. So I was like, okay, I'll go work in LA for a year. And if I really hate it, then I'll have this, these universities to fall back on and go to grad school. And so, I was drinking, doing drugs, doing all that stuff. And I remember telling myself, like, at the time, like, I'm just enjoying the end of college, right? Like, it's the parties. But I was also not returning any of my friends' phone calls because I didn't want to see them, because when I would see them, it would make my friend being dead real.
Mm-hmm.
And I was also dealing with the fact that I was starting to realize I had really bad abandonment issues. It's like when somebody didn't want to be around me anymore, I didn't know how to handle that. And I was handling it really poorly. But it's also like, I forget who told me this, but, one of the books I've read on just like getting better and mental health and stuff like that, it's like, when you think you're at rock bottom, there's still a little more space you can crawl deep down into, right? Like, whatever we think's rock bottom usually isn't. Like, it's actually a lot worse than that.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's further down than that.
Yeah, and also the thing is anything about it, you're not at that rock bottom yet. Mm-hmm. And that's the other scary thing, right? And so I didn't even talk to any of my friends when we graduated. I ran away to LA. And that was another recurring theme I was seeing, was when things didn't go my way, or maybe I made a mistake and I was embarrassed to admit it, or I felt like I was being this imperfect version of myself, I would run away because I didn't know how to deal with the repercussions of letting somebody down, or of dealing with something. I didn't know how to look my friends in the face and feel weak, right? Like, be sad that my friend had died, right? So instead, I just smoked a bunch of weed, drank a bunch of beer, and, did a bunch of lines every weekend, right? Mm-hmm. And didn't deal with it. And then I remember I even told myself, I looked in the mirror one day and I'm like, you're just enjoying college. When you get to LA, you're going to go be an adult. Like that just happens, right? You're just going to be an adult now. And which is foolish, because like I still don't feel like an adult, but whatever. And so that like recurring theme of running away from your problems, like, and it's that cliche statement, like, you can run as far as you want, the problems will follow you. And I just didn't believe that. I didn't want to believe that. And I was like, I'll go be new me in LA, and I'll close the door on all this, and I'll just start over again. Mm-hmm. And so I got a job. Everyone was proud of me. They're like, oh wow, you got a job you wanted. It was a good job in LA at this nice company. And working in entertainment with movie people and stuff like that. And I was like, okay, like, I'm doing it. Like, this is what I set out I was going to do. I told people I was going to be a movie agent, blah, blah, blah. And one, like, that industry is so toxic. like mm-hmm. It's just awful. But also two, it's like, there are other industries that I'm ignorant towards, but like, it's also the type of industry where it doesn't really matter how toxic you are and how damaged you are, as long as you get the job done and you do it the way that they like you to do it. They don't really care about all the other stuff going on in your life, right? And I mean, at the end of the day, it's a job, so it makes sense. But so like, I moved out there, and within a matter of months, like, I was drinking too much every weekend. Sometimes after work, I'd go to work hungover. But the other problem is it was really when I started to see that I wasn't somebody who was fun when they were drunk. I was somebody that either wanted to fight you, or I was somebody that wanted to cry all night, and no one wants to be around either versions of that person, right? Mm-hmm. Like, when you're on a night out, you don't want to deal with the crying person, and you especially don't want to deal with the person getting you kicked out of everywhere. And that's what I would do is, I would go out, and the first couple of years would make me feel really good and loose and talkative and bubbly and the kind of personality that I know people like and everything. And then I couldn't just have a couple, so I just keep going. And before I know it, I was either in handcuffs, or I was on a couch crying, or in an alley, or sleeping in my car, or even worse, driving my car back home, and just making a lot of poor choices and ruining my reputation out there, hurting women out there for no reason, and that I was dating or whatever, and just not taking them seriously. And really prick, like, and an asshole. And you know, and when I look back on it now, it was like, you know, it was just like, it was 25 years of not dealing with your stuff coming out in any way it could, because all it wanted to was come out, was like, and I need to get out. Like, you have pushed me into this box inside of you, and this thing is going to explode if you don't do something about it. And I don't remember specifically what day it was, but I think I was about 6 months in, and I was just like, I was sat on the couch at my house that I was renting, and I was just like, I hate my life, I hate myself. I did everything I could to lose all this weight, to get this good job, to be this college athlete, get good grades, all this stuff. And I still despise the reflection in the mirror every morning. And I hate myself. And everywhere I go, I'm uncomfortable. And every time I'm in a room full of people, I feel completely alone. And I remembered, I was like, I can't even think of a moment up until when I got into my 20s where I had done one thing for myself in my entire life. I had always done things for other people. And I think the first I ever made that was entirely 100% like for me was like, I'm going to go hard playing rugby. And, you know, even though I didn't fall into rugby because I wanted to, but once I got there, I was like, I'm going to do this. And I did it well. I did it pretty well. Right. And I remember, like, I was sitting there and I was just like, I miss having that feeling of that's mine and I'm doing it for me. And, you know, and then I was also working in an industry where you are just somebody that serves people for a very long time. And then you just become a glorified version of somebody that serves way more glorified people than you. And it's just that totem pole, right? That's the entertainment industry in a nutshell right there. I mean, servicing people, promoted, servicing a different level of people, promoted, until, you know, you either OD or you retire. Or go to counseling, right? And so I remember I was like, okay, what are my options? I was like, I can stay and work this job that I hate. I can kill myself, or I was like, I can go to grad school, because I still had that in the back of my pocket, right? And then I was like, I think I'm going to do that. And then I remember thinking, like, I want to see if it will still work. So I contacted, like, it was at this point, it was just the UK universities that were still deferred. My American universities had only given me 6 months to do it. And I didn't really want to stay in America anyways. Like, I had been to England a couple times. Just from playing rugby, I had a couple English friends that brought me over there, and a really, really good friend of mine named Rob, who played with me in California. He was from Norwich. And so he took me out to the UK for a bit, and I just loved it out there. And he was actually the one who told me, he's like, why didn't you go to grad school in the UK? Like, you love it out here and you get on, you know, and you love your football. And he was the reason I applied to a bunch. And he even told me, he's like, you should apply to Newcastle University. He's like, it's a really good school and Newcastle's the best night out. And I was like, all right. And so then I did that. And so I was like, all right, I'm going to see if I can do the grad school thing. And contacted Newcastle Uni. They're like, yeah, we'll still honor your acceptance. Did all the paperwork and everything like that. And they're like, yeah, you just got to, you know, basically, like, there's all this paperwork you have to do, right, to get your student visa and all this stuff. And you have to sort out housing and everything. And I remember, like, when I was close to knowing that everything was going to be approved, and I had about maybe 4.5 to 5 months left in California before I was going to have to fly out to Newcastle. That was when I decided, like, all right, I'm going to go out there for that year that they're giving me this visa, and I'm going to do whatever I want on my own terms. I'm going to be the person I want to be. I'm going to not listen to anybody else's input, and I'm just going to do what I think's right for 1 year. And then the day before that visa expires, I'm going to kill myself. I set that intention almost 18 months in advance. Like, I'm going to do that. I don't have any desire to keep living this life of pain anymore or whatever. And I'm like, this is going to be my last holiday. Right. And amazed. Like, I sorted everything out. I got the housing sorted. I got the money sorted. I reached out to Newcastle University's rugby team and asked them if I could join the team, and they said yeah, and that was great, and I was super excited. I'm like, I'm gonna go out to England, I'm gonna go play rugby for a year. And so for the 5 months that I was still out in LA, like I was just like, I'm gonna see people, I'm not gonna tell anyone. Why would I? And I'm just gonna train so I can be, somewhat decent when I go out and play with people who are far better than me. And then that was kind of it. And I had all these, I remember I reconnected with a lot of my friends that I'd pushed away, and, I'd go meet up with them, have dinner and stuff like that. And all of them said the same things, like, I miss you and all this stuff. And like, not one of them knew, like, for me, that was goodbye. Like I was making sure, in a weird way, I was still people pleasing, right? Like I was making sure that the people that I knew cared about me got to see me one last time and think that I was okay, because they were never going to see me again. And I just kind of did this little farewell tour of all the different places in California that I'd lived, and said bye to people and partied, and that was about it. And then I quit my job, and I left for England. And no one really noticed that, like, I got rid of all my stuff. Like, no one noticed that. Like, I sold my car. Like why would I sell my car if I'm only gone for a year? Why would I, of course I'm going to need it when I get back to California. You can't get anywhere without a car. And I like gave away things like that were meaningful to me. And by the time I left my parents' house to get on the plane, like I had 2 bags, and it was just stuff to play rugby in, stuff to wear in England, and I think a couple books. And I was just like, okay. And my parents had no idea that they'd said bye to me. Like when I said bye to my parents, like I had no intention of ever seeing them again. And then I went out to Newcastle, and that's really where, I was about 25 years old, and, I hadn't been dealing with the fact that my buddy had died. I hadn't been dealing with the fact that I was heartbroken over this girl that had broken up with me. And I hadn't dealt with the fact that really I had just never respected my own boundaries and lived for myself. And, but when I got out there, it didn't matter. Nothing mattered, because I was going to be dead in a year. So I was like, I'm just going to be me. And if you don't like me, fuck you. I don't care. Like, it doesn't matter. And that was a very liberating moment for me to feel like, right? Like I had never, ever had that mentality, even though I would, go to punk shows and scream unique, live your own life and stuff like that. Like I felt like a hypocrite most of the time, because I was doing anything but that. And so Newcastle, and and that was a whole, like, getting acclimated to the city and everything was just a whole different world, right? Like not just being in England, but also being in Newcastle and stuff like that. And I remember when I got off the plane, and it was when I realized, I'm like, what have I done? Like, I'm like in England now. I don't know anyone here, and now I'm like, I live in the north of England. Everyone thinks I'm in London. And like I'm supposed to meet these dudes that play rugby, who have agreed to let me stay at their house until my dorms open. And I don't even know what they look like, because it was before the days that you like vetted people on Facebook and stuff like that. Like I was just going off emails, and these rugby guys had this big sign out with my name on it, and stuff. And I was like, okay, cool. And they were really nice. They were a little younger than me. I stayed with them for about a month, and they took me all the spots, and I was still very much rigid then. Like I was still like trying to be me, but it was hard. And but like after like that like month of like kind of discomfort, and and we were also doing preseason training, so that was like a big part of my schedule and stuff like that. I moved into my dorms, and really started to kind of go on this next iteration of my life, this next journey. And my friend from Norwich, who I played with in California, I don't like, he's one of my best friends in the entire world. He actually lives in America now. He married a girl in Omaha, and they have a family together, and I go out and visit them now and stuff. But and I don't think he even knows this, but really weird. He called me. I'm in Newcastle, and he said, "Hey mate, you know, like he was originally be going to Swansea for grad school. He's like, I just want to let you know, like I got accepted to Northumbria Uni. He's all, I'll be in Newcastle in a week. I'll be living out there for the year with you." And
Nice.
my first thought was like, what? And then also like, you're completely derailing my plans now because no one's supposed to know me here. And also like I hadn't talked to him in a year because he was friends with me when my buddy died. I pushed him away too. And so for him to say that, like, I was just like, oh my God. And he's like, yeah, I'll be living, basically across the street. Like, and so that was one of the big moments that really like changed things for me. Cause he got out there, and so I had a couple weeks to kind of get used to Newcastle, get a little acclimated and everything like that. And the first thing that I loved so much was just how not only genuine but just nice Geordies are. Like everybody in Newcastle is like, even if you catch someone on a bad day, like they don't tend to take it out on you. Where it's like people in LA are in a good mood and they take that out on you. Like it was just a different, like I've always been a good morning person, like good morning, and stuff like that. And so when people say that to me, I'm always surprised because it's just not a thing in Southern California, especially LA. And so like that was really, I liked that. Also, like, it always felt like, even if I was just buying a cup of coffee, like, yeah, my accent, people would ask me where I'm from and stuff, but like people genuinely had 5 minutes to talk to you about things. And I liked that too. And, but like one of the biggest things was, he got there and he's like, Newcastle are playing Norwich. He's all, I'm going to take you to see Newcastle play. He's like, you can't. And I was still very ignorant to Newcastle United specifically. I was just a football fan. Like I would just watch whatever Premier League game was on. I didn't really have a club. I just enjoyed the sport, right? And by saying that, it usually meant I watched the top, the greedy six, because that's all we got on the television out here. But
so you get over it most of the time.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, right. And so I was like, okay. He's like, mate, you haven't experienced football if you've not gone to a Newcastle United game. He's like, at home. And I was like, okay. And so he got his tickets, and I'll never forget that day. It was like I'd just been in Jesmond or at training in my own little rugby bubble for the first month that I lived there. So I had never even been in City Center when a match day was on at home. And I remember like me and him were just getting a pint at some pub in either Jesmond or close to there. And you just start seeing like the black and white shirts. And then we would start going closer into the city center, and you just see all these people. It was like, I'd never seen anything like that. Right. Like I come from Los Angeles. We have the most fickle fans in the world. Right. And I just saw like the city essentially like kind of half of it shutting down, and everybody going to this stadium that's like right in the middle. And I was like, this is an experience. Like, this is cool. And then when we went in and we won, like I talked to you about in my prior podcast. And when that goal went in and the stadium erupted, like I don't think, like I've never experienced, and I will never experience anything like that ever again.
The noise is something else, isn't it? Like, I don't think people, when you first hear that noise, that roar, it's just something else.
It really is. It's so funny because it was such a big moment, right? Because you have what, 52,000 people there, and you in your squad and the PAs and everything. But I could, like, I almost feel like I could tell you the facial expression of every person within 10 rows of me, and like just like everything that happened, like I still see it so vividly because for me, like having grown up in a world where I felt like no one liked me, and the only time I was ever accepted was punk rock. And I'll never forget the first time I went to a punk rock show that slapped in the mosh pit and everything about it that I loved, right? It was like that, but times 10, because it was so many people and they were all just in the same moment together. And I was like, this is beautiful. And I remember like I looked at Rob and I was like, I support Newcastle United now. And he just started laughing. And he's like, you're not going to support Norwich? And I'm all like, no. And so that was like the first moment really that kind of took me away from my pre-planned destination. Right. And when I got there, I didn't know how I was going to do what I had intended on doing. After I kind of got the lay of the land and stuff like that. And unfortunately, Somebody had committed suicide by jumping off of the Time Bridge while I was there, like within the first month or two. I kind of put in my head, like, that's how I'm going to do it. I'm like, that seems easy. I was like, I'll just get really pissed. I'll smoke a spliff and I'm going to jump off that bridge, in December or whenever my visa is about to expire. And so I got really addicted to that feeling that I got at St. James Park, though. And I was like, fucking, I'm here for a year. I was like, I'm going to go to as much football as I can because it doesn't matter. And, and I'll do the bare minimum I can to graduate. Because like I have to keep my grades up or I lose my visa. And so I go to school and, do the bare minimum and I'll go to the football and I play rugby. And then I just go out and party. And, I was still drinking too much. I was still being a total asshole to people. And I still wasn't dealing with my stuff. But when I wasn't in that mode, I was doing things I liked doing. I was living by my own schedule. I was asking questions I wanted to ask. I was experiencing things I chose to experience. But the thing that was starting to change was people were starting to dislike me for that. I was starting to make friends and like I had made friends with the other international students in my dorms, but I was starting to make like friends from the area. And it really came down because of the football and because of like my love for punk music. I'd never been in a city that, was smaller, right? I'd always been in this spread out California area where it's very rare that you go to, you're not going to see the same person twice at a game, let alone a concert. Right. But, so like I would go to shows and I would see some of the same people there and they would see me and, and like having the California accent, people would ask me where I was from. So it was easy to meet people, but I just started meeting people and making friends. And then I would go to the football on Saturdays and I would usually just go by myself because, it was hard for Rob to go all the time. And I didn't really know anyone else that went to the football. So I just go by myself and watch it and love it. And then, go meet up with other students and, get on it or whatever. Or I would take students, be like, you have to experience this and, and stuff like that. And then like, I really, really just started more so to do the things that I wanted to do. And I'll never forget, one of my best friends in the world, he's like a brother to me. His name's Joe Bullymore. He lives in Washington. Your Washington, not mine.
Sunderland.
Yeah, basically Sunderland. But no, he's diehard Newcastle supporter through and through. Like I saw him at a game through a mutual friend, and he sold me a ticket because he had an extra ticket or whatever. And so then he became the guy I would hit up when I wanted tickets. And then he would start introducing me to other people. And then once I got a little more confident, like talking football, because most people thought I was just a dumb yank. These people started warming up to me. They're like, oh, maybe he's not so dumb. Like maybe he knows he knows what offside is, so that's good, right? And I was so obsessed with Newcastle by that point. I think people just liked how I acted like a child when they would talk to me about it because I had that childlike wonder for Newcastle. Still, I hadn't been weathered by years of supporting the club yet. I was just this baby to it all. And so then me and him became friends and we started going to games together and he would take me to pubs where like supporters were. And I started to feel like a part of the community. And that was really when I started to be like, maybe I just hate my life out there. Like, I don't hate my life out here at all, really. Like, I still kind of drink too much, but no one here seems to mind. And then, and stuff like that. But, I would still, drink a little too much and want to fight, or I'd get really emotional because I wasn't dealing with things. And so that year progressed and everything. And I still very much just didn't want to live. But then it became more like, I just didn't want to go back to my old life.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to keep that life. And I met a couple of really, really good friends that are like family to me now that live out there. And like we would all meet up at the same pub before the match. We'd all, hang out. A lot of them like the same music. Like we would just go to shows together. And it was like I'd found my tribe in a weird way for the first time in my life. And but I found my tribe on my own terms as the person that I wanted to be, somebody that I wanted to be. And and none of them hated me for that. And I'd never experienced that before because I'd always been what I thought people wanted me to be. And that was the most liberating feeling of my entire life. And I'll never forget it because it was just small things. It was just, like we got to a point where like I wouldn't text these guys before the match. I would just show up at the pub because I knew that that's where there was going to be a table there. And I liked that. It was like that stability that I'd always yearned for, like, and then having been there for a minute, there were pubs where, the guy or the girl behind the bar knew me really well because I'd go there so much, and, they'd talk to me and treat me like I was somebody that lived there or whatever. And I felt like I belonged. And I started to realize like I had been yearning for somewhere to belong for my whole life. And for 26 years, I felt like I didn't belong anywhere. And then I moved to Newcastle and felt like I belonged for the first time in my entire life. And these people all loved me. And then I even met a woman who changed my life in better ways. And Jordy Lass, and we fell in love and everything like that. And being with her and being with her family out, they live out towards they live in County Durham, and so I would go out there and be a part of their life, and I liked that. And it was just like every single day that I was there, I shed one layer of this person that I wasn't, and I kind of opened up more about the person that I've always been, because I tried so hard to be this, rugby playing, sports watching, beer drinking, degenerate in a lot of ways, because I thought that that was what society wanted me to be. Like, we've created a society that completely caters to men that don't deal with their trauma, can get by completely on the bare minimum of dealing with the things going on in their heads. And essentially, like, it's like we have this, everyone, like, I mean, it's male dominated, but I don't even like calling our society male dominated. I call it boy dominated, because, like, how can you be a quote unquote man if you're not willing to, one, look in the mirror, and two, do something about the reflection staring back at you?
Yeah.
And we've created a society that caters to that. Like, you can be toxic and you'll get applaud for that. You can be a drug addict and you'll get applaud for that. You can be a womanizer and you get applaud for that. You can be a shitty dad and people will forgive you for that. And I don't, and I don't understand that. Right. So I wanted to keep being this version of myself where, yeah, I am sensitive. I am somebody that thinks outside the box. I am somebody that's open-minded, and I don't like limiting myself to one thing. And so I just became that person in this, people don't understand. Like, I say this all the time, like, Newcastle is this hidden gem in the world where it's small enough to feel like you belong and have a community, but it's also big enough to be, and they have, because of the schools and because of the immigration and everything like that, they also have just this open-minded world there too, where you can kind of be yourself. And, like, there are things that are taboo, but, for the most part, like, people are going to be pretty accepting of you as long as you're respectful and genuine and understand kind of the way in which the Geordies live. Right. And I felt like I understood that really well. And I liked that because I have that mentality. And so, that all happened. And this is where the turn really happens, right? This is where, we go back to talking about dealing with our cycles with experience, right? Because that's all you get, right? Is how you dealt with it the last time. And, I had been out there for almost 3 years. My visa was about to expire. I was going to have to come back to America. There was no way of getting out of it. I'd stayed there as long as I possibly could. And I was like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to go back. And that was terrifying for me. Me and that person, we ended up getting married, and came out with me, which made me feel good because I felt like we'd always go back and everything. And and then I came out to California. Me and her came out to California, and this is the thing about trauma and cycles is they're inevitable if you don't do anything to resolve the person you are that put you in them to begin with, right? Because that's the thing, is like, there's all these outlying things that affect who we are, contribute to who we are, and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, like, accountability is where it's at, right? Like, you're 110% responsible for who you are, especially when you become an adult. And I remember reading this saying once where it's, you're not responsible for the trauma you went through as a child. You're 110% responsible for how you deal with it as an adult. And that's where I think a lot of people fail, and myself included. And I'll talk about that in a minute. But it's you get to this like moment of peace, or like maybe you get to a breakthrough in therapy, or you get a certain amount of money, right? We have this destination happiness, and we think, oh, once I'm there, it's okay. And so that was what I did, was like, okay, like I've got my own family now. I went back to the same type of job in LA, didn't learn the first time, had to go right back, right? I went to the same type of job, knowing that it's an industry that just does not cater to having a family, especially a working class family that's used to a much slower paced life like Newcastle, right? I'm working in the thick of Hollywood. So that was my first mistake. Moved out to LA and got caught up in that LA lifestyle again. And then watched everything that I had worked my ass off for completely collapse, because I was too busy, without realizing it, doing the exact same things that I did to cope with my problems, just in a different way, right? And so, I think that, whatever you believe, like, I'm not a religious person, let's call it the universe for lack of better words, the universe will put you through another cycle, right? To see if you're going to do the same shit. And so, I was out in LA for 4 years, and all I wanted to do was get back to England, but I didn't know how to. And, things weren't great in my marriage. And a lot of that is just because it can't be easy being married to somebody who doesn't respect their own boundaries, who doesn't know themselves well enough to stand up for what they believe in, and who is constantly scared of failure, right? And all of these things. And so a lot of the trauma that I hadn't really dealt with, that I thought I was better because, Newcastle saved me, when in reality it's like I was doing some of the work, I wasn't doing all of the work, right? And so now this next shitstorm needs to come to see if I'm going to completely self-destruct again, like I do every time, right? And so when I got back to LA and everything like that, like I was very much in the, like, I love my life. Like I've never had my own family. Like I've never felt close to anybody. And I've got friends that love me like a brother. I have friends that I love like brothers and sisters who look out for me. And most of them are in England, but like I have good friends, and I have a wife, and I have in-laws, and I have a family, and we have plans, and we have a dog, and I have a good job, and all this stuff. And like, I'm doing it now. And that's the other problem with society, is we've created this like bare minimum society, right? Like you can have a job, you can have a hobby, you can have a marriage or, partnership, you can have kids. And then as long as you're taking care of those things and not being really bad at them, you can kind of just drink every night, or you can do this, or you can do that, right? And we'll kind of look the other way. And I have so many friends that have this justification, like, bro, I only smoke weed every night to blow off the steam from all this, from handling my stuff. And it's like, well, no, actually, like, you're numbing yourself because there's something you're not dealing with that you don't want to deal with, right?
Absolutely.
And that was what I was doing. And, and that can't be easy to be, it can't be easy to be married to somebody who doesn't respect those things about themselves, and who isn't living to their true self. And that can be really disheartening. And so the next step came, right? Me and my wife split up, and I don't want to really get into the details of that. It doesn't really matter, but, so we split up, and while I was in England, I had really opened up to my friends out there. Like, they knew a lot about me. I eventually told them that that my plan was to kill myself by the end of this, and I knew that they were worried about that. And then I told them I didn't want to do it anymore, and everything like that. And so there are all these things, right, that like my friends would worry about with me, because they know that shit's kind of unhinged, right, and for lack of better words. And so is my entire life gets uprooted again. And, I've now lost the family I've built. I had taken this new job, which contributed to the rupture of my marriage, that I shouldn't have taken, but they offered me so much money that I couldn't say no. And it was in the field I wanted to be in. And it really derailed a lot of the plans that we had going forward. And, and I can't imagine the level of disappointment that my partner had felt with that. And there were other things too, no relationship's perfect. There's never ever one person to blame. There's two people to always blame. There's always problems, and it's whether you want to work on them or not. Right. And so we chose not to, and that's fine. No harm, no foul. Right. Sucks, but no harm, no foul. And, and so then they decided not to renew my contract at that job that I gambled my marriage on. And so I lost my job, and I was like, and I was miserable at this job already, but the money, I was fine because I was making so much money. I was like, whatever. I hate it, but everyone hates their job, right? And I'm like, at least it pays the bills. And it was just like, I had to move out of this apartment, and basically, like, I lost everything. And when I told my really close friends about that, all of them were just so, and you could see it when they would talk, you could hear it, or you could see it when we were on FaceTime or they're on the phone, like, worried about me. And my grandparents were worried about me because all of them were like, oh, my cycles, right? Doesn't go Shade's way. He completely self-destructs and he ruins everything he touches until there's nothing left. And then he runs away to rebuild himself, and then he does it again. And these are cycles I know about myself. And I remember when all of this was happening, and I'd also injured my knee, so I couldn't exercise. Like, I couldn't even do the one thing that would keep me together, was like just killing my body, right? And so, like, I literally, like, I had these 2 duffel bags and a limp, and I'm living in my car, basically writing out this last contract, and then going back to my parents' house and not knowing what I'm doing with my life. And also, like, I'm kind of a drug addict because I thought that it was okay to do cocaine at work because everybody else did, or, like, smoking weed's just so normal here and everything. So it's like, and then I realized, like, that's just been a massive contribution to all these other ruptures in my life. And I'm sitting there, and I remember that saying, like, your cycles will repeat. It's whether you're going to go through it with experience or with the same level of ignorance you went through it with the last time. And I remember I was sitting there in my car, and I was just like, I've worked so hard to be me, right? To be this version of myself that I love and everything like that. And I was like, I just don't want to self-destruct, and I don't want to lose the things I still have. Like, I don't want to lose my family in Newcastle. Like, I don't want to lose my boys and girls, like my brothers and sisters out here. I was like, yeah, I don't have like a conventional family, but I have a network of friends all over the world that love me like family. And I don't want to turn my back on them like I have everything else when things got hard. And I don't want to run away. I always run away. And I was also like, and I need to stop just being high all the time, dealing with my shit, because, I would tell myself that every day. I was like, oh, I got a good job. I pay the bills, happy wife, happy life, dogs fed. I'm gonna go get high. Right. Because I've ticked off the boxes society's put in place for me. And I was like, I just don't want to be that person anymore. And so I remember, like, my buddy Joe, the dude that I met at St. James Park, who's like my best friend now, like, he flew out and he spent 3 days with me, and, we went to a show, and, I'm getting even emotional talking about it because I had never let anyone be there for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd always just dealt with things myself. And I think that was a big problem with a lot of my relationships, was my partners didn't know how to be with somebody who wouldn't let them help him. And so I was realizing all this. And so when he came out, I just let him be there for me. And I just told him everything that I was feeling. And I started realizing, like, okay, like, most people, like, will run back to mom or dad, and I don't really have that scenario, or they'll run to their girlfriend. I don't have that anymore. And I was like, what's your goal? Okay, my goal is to not self-destruct like I used to. How am I going to do that? I have no fucking clue. So what I did was, I remember I booked all these flights to just go visit all of my friends that love me unconditionally, because I just needed to feel close to those people, right? Like, I needed somebody to be like, somebody that not only knew me, but, like, that wasn't going to judge me for what I was going through, right? And so, I flew out to Omaha, and I stayed with Rob, the dude from Norwich, for a week with his wife and his kid, and I spent Thanksgiving with them. And Joe came out, and my friends called me every day from England and all over, and so I did that. And then I also started going to therapy, because I didn't know how to tell people, like, I essentially lied to all of my friends for almost a year about what I was going to do. Right. and when I went out to England. And so I was like, I'm clearly capable of deceiving them again. Like, I need to see a professional, because I don't think that what's going on inside my head and what I'm doing to cope with it is the right way. And this is like the problem with the stigma surrounding therapy is, you know, especially for like that toxic masculine world, right? It's like, oh, you go to therapy, you're weak, or there must be something wrong with you, right? Well, it's like, first off, I would say that there isn't one person in the world that wouldn't benefit from some form of therapy, because we all have something wrong with us, right? And there's no perfect. Like, you could have the best two parents in the world, they're still going off of their own experience, and they still did things wrong.
Yeah.
That you got to deal with, right? And then so like I hate that those two things that are like the negatives of therapy, because I don't necessarily think I'm crazy, you know, like I know I'm damaged, and I know that I'm also ignorant towards things, right? So I need somebody to teach me how to cope with things, because I've never had anyone listen to me, or I've never talked to anyone with enough experience to tell me how to cope with things. So I keep going back to the same coping mechanisms. I still keep running back to drugs or alcohol or, you know, women, whatever. Right. And, so I enrolled in therapy. I quit doing drugs, and, you know, and therapy was really beneficial because like I could vent about things that I didn't necessarily know how to vent about. And then I would also talk about like how I used to cope with things, and we would work out different ways of coping with what I was going through. And that overall feeling was like, I just don't want to self-destruct. I know what that rock bottom is, and I know the dark places I'm capable of going. I don't even want to give myself the opportunity to sink back into that. And so then I pretty much go to therapy once a week. And it's beneficial, and I think that everyone should do it. I think that, you know, the other flip side of that, going back to that, like, we get comfortable. I think people go to therapy for a little bit and then realize, oh, I've had a breakthrough, like I'm good now. And it's like, no, like actually you're going against however many years of conditioning. Like, it's a work in progress. And all it's doing, like all your current pain right now, or frustration or issues right now, all they're doing is preparing you for another cycle or another level up of what that's going to be, right? And you know, and I'm currently going through that right now. My mom recently passed away, and, you know, like in my eyes, I'm like, I lost the family I built, you know, 2 years ago, and now I'm losing the family, the very little amount of family I was given, and that's a void that is unfillable. But, you know, she passed away, and before she passed away, you know, we found out that she had brain cancer and she was sick. And so, you know, that was Christmas, and that was coming up 2 years of like, everyone's really proud that Shay didn't self-destruct, right? Like, I didn't self-destruct. I picked my life up. I got a job I love. I moved down to San Diego. I love living down here. You know, and in a weird way, you know, like, when I didn't want to deal with things and I needed to escape, and I needed just something to take my mind off of what was in front of me, like, you know, I would do what my therapist would say. I started meditating and all that stuff. But, you know, going back to like the Newcastle of it all, is like, I created this Twitter, and I just now have this, like, I don't like anything on Twitter that isn't football related. I don't follow anything on Twitter that isn't football related or Newcastle United related. So when I go onto Twitter, it's a world of just Newcastle and football. Like, and the algorithm just keeps feeding that stuff to me, because I won't follow anything else on that. I have other platforms for other things, right? I'll never talk politics on it. I'll never talk this. I may maybe throw a bit of mental health in there, because I think that that's important to talk about. But other than that, it is strictly football. And so I jump into this world. And for like the first 5 months I was on Twitter, I just followed people and listened to what they were talking about, because it was just nice to have somebody to talk to Newcastle stuff about, right? And that really helped me on when I just needed a distraction, you know, or if like, I'm like, you know, maybe I wanted to go out and get drunk because I'm not feeling so great today. I just like jump onto the Twitter and start talking about football, and then I feel a little better to, you know, it's not going to cure you. It's not going to make you feel completely better, but what you're just you know, you're looking for something to hold on to that's going to give you that little leg up to get you out of the pit you're in that moment, right? Because it's not like, today I'm cured, I'm now cured forever. No, you're cured in this moment, this one moment. Like, all that matters is the moment you're currently in, you know, and that's what you have to do, right? And so, you know, and so like, that was really, really helpful in a lot of ways too, because like I really, really missed Like when my life fell apart, all I wanted to do was fly back to England and be in Newcastle with my friends and go to a match and, and go to my favorite pubs and see the faces that I love seeing and being around, being around Geordies because they're just so much better than Californians. But like unfortunately at that moment couldn't do it, and then we went into a pandemic, right? And so like I haven't been back yet. And so like all that, right? You lose your mother, and everybody starts to worry again, right? That you're going to self-destruct and everything. And I remember when we found out that she was sick, I called, I called Joe, I called all my friends in England. I told all my really close friends because I didn't really know who else to tell. And it was the same thing where like they wanted to be there, but you could also kind of tell like they were worried. Like they're like, okay, like, the marriage and the job thing in LA didn't destroy him, but like this might be the thing that like puts him back off the edge. Like he's been doing really well. He's been off drugs for over a year. He's now obsessed with running and all this stuff, and like he does all this other stuff, and he's doing really well in San Diego. Like, of course, something's going to come in to try and derail that. And that's where like I really, really like to hammer in this need for working on yourself, because my entire life I've been somebody that has ran away. I've been somebody that has been unaccountable. I've been somebody that's selfish. I've been narcissistic. I'm somebody that has not been reliable in the face of danger. And I've lied to myself about being all of those negative things my entire life, but I've never, ever walked the walk. I have only ever talked the talk.
Mm-hmm.
And so you go through these cycles to go off of experience, right? And so, Christmas Eve, I couldn't spend Christmas with my family because of the pandemic. My brother called me on Christmas Eve and told me, Mom's got a lesion in her brain. They're saying that it's really bad. They're saying that, over the next 24 hours, we're going to find out what's going on. And we found out that it's terminal. We can operate, but it's not going to do much. I mean, basically, she's got 4 months left to live. And I was out of town. I was just hanging out with some friends that were happy to, within my bubble of COVID people at the time, right? And just spending Christmas with them. Like I could have easily done whatever I wanted. I could have gone and picked up some cocaine or, gone and smoked some weed, whatever, right? Like I could have done whatever I wanted. And I remember I just kind of stayed in a room for a day and processed it all. And I didn't really return any phone calls or anything like that. And then, and then I decided like, okay, you gotta deal with it. And so this goes back to like dealing things with experience. They said my mom had 4 months, and they were pretty much on the money for that. I work remote, and I have kind of a pretty flex schedule. So I started going up to my parents' house. It's like a 2-hour drive, but I started going up like 3 days, 4 days a week, right after Christmas, right into the New Year, to help take care of Mom. And my other siblings kind of split up the rest of the days. And I took care of my mom for the last 4 months of her life and watched her, wither away, which was unfortunate, but also had conversations with her that I wouldn't trade for anything in the world. Like I'm sad that she's dead, but of course, like how could I not be? But I also trade those conversations for anything. Like the things I got to share with her, the shameful things in my life that I shared with her that I wanted her to know about me before she died, and the non-judgment that I got from her only made me feel closer to her before she went, and the things she shared with me. But the biggest thing in all of that whole scenario was everybody got to see me be the one who didn't break, the one who didn't choke, the one who didn't, the one who showed up. And I've always told everyone, like, you have to show up. And I think I've carried that chip on my shoulder my whole life because I have a biological father who never showed up. And so it was something that I would always preach, but I never practiced. Things got tough. Like, you weren't going to find me. I'll help other people, but like, I'm going to run too. And my mother included, couldn't believe just like how strong I was through all of that. And and before she got really bad, she told me like, I worry about everyone, but like, I don't worry about you anymore because like, I know you're going to be fine. And so like, that's why you keep going with this work, right? That's why you don't get lazy with it. That's why you talk about your problems. That's why you share, because when people share with you, you're going to learn from their experience and you're going to be able to tackle things you never thought possible. I never thought for a second that I would survive that year that I went to England. I wanted nothing more than to die. And then I opened up and I started talking to people and I let people get close to me for the first time in my entire life. And I discovered a love that I had never ever seen before and experienced before. And it made me want to live, but it also gave me the strength to deal with things that came. And when my life imploded again, I could have went the other way, but I remembered those experiences. And then when this next, version happened, I was able to just kind of buckle down, not really feel too sorry for myself, and be there for my mother in the one moment in my entire life that she actually needed me to be there. Not wanted me to be there, needed me to be there. And it was hard and all that stuff, but I faced it. And I'm still dealing with the loss. And, that's okay. I'm grieving. I'm very much in grief right now. I mean, the funeral's tomorrow. But also I have a big sense of pride in myself because the one person in the world that loved me unconditionally from day one, I got to reciprocate that unconditional love to for the last 4 months of her life. And that's why you do the work, because there is no greater feeling than being able to not only look at yourself in the mirror and have a bit of pride, but also to be able to give that type of love that's been given to you to other people. And when you're damaged and you're, numbed and you're not dealing with the things that you're dealing with, and you're not there for whether it's your kids or your parents or your girlfriend, boyfriend, partner, husband, wife, whatever, right? Like that's why you do the work, because the pride you feel in being able to be somebody stronger than you were yesterday in the face of true test makes you better overall going forward. It makes you stronger going forward. And that means that the bounce back is so much easier. And you also learn to be okay with feeling the way you're feeling, and, like there are days where I want to just lay in bed and cry. I miss my mom. Of course I do. And I don't see that as a weakness anymore. Like, I don't see that as something I have to hide from people. And if you don't want to deal with that, that's okay. But like, I'm going to deal with things the way I deal with things. And I'm also like able to be there for my, right? We're all going to lose our parents one day. It sucks that I had to be the first one in our group to do it. But just like all of those guys and girls that are just amazing in the world were there for me when I lost everything. When it feels like they're losing things, I'm going to be able to use that experience to be there for them in the way that they were there for me. And like, if there's one thing I can say to anyone listening, right, it's on those days that you really, really can't get up and pick yourself up for yourself, you have to remember who was there for you and gave you that unconditional love, and pick yourself up for them, because you are only going through this test to be able to pay that love and that experience forward in some other way. And you'll never know when it's going to come, but it will. And so in a weird way, like, I'm grateful that I lost the family I built, because in a weird way, it prepped me to go down this journey of therapy and understanding myself and loving people and opening up and letting myself feel insecure and letting myself be sensitive and open. But it also gave me this whole arsenal to deal with arguably the hardest moment of my entire life with my mother. And that's why you have to do these things. That's why you have to work on these things. And that's why it's so important, because, we have kids, and, I wouldn't want my kid to go through 30 years of his life feeling the way I felt. My partner or the woman I love, whoever, right? The man I want to be with, whatever, right? Like, why would you, and so it's like, I never ever believed in that, like, oh, don't kill yourself because so many people are going to be sorry that you're gone guilt trip. No, it's like, don't kill yourself, because if you stick around long enough and you put in the work, you're going to see yourself become a hero, whether you like it or not. And that's why you do the work. That's why you work on yourself, and that's why you try to understand what your triggers are, and you try and find ways of bypassing them, right? Ways of tricking them, right? Because like I have my triggers still, and on days that I want to go be self-destructive or something like that, I create a world that I can be self-destructive in, right? Okay, like, okay, I'll go run 10 miles tomorrow because I'm angry or I'm sad, right? After a 10-mile run, like I don't want to go get high and drunk all day. Like I want to eat and chill out, right? And I feel like I've gotten something out of me, right? Or you go to therapy and you talk about what you're feeling, and and that's why it's so important. And and I tell all my, and I have guy friends, and growing up loving like being a football supporter and being a punk rock dude. Like I only know manly men to an extent, right? Like it's that whole, that world, like, in punk rock too, it's just like that kind of, like I just call it toxic masculinity because it's like, why are you trying so hard? But like, I only know guys like that, right? And even women like that, right? But I've had loads of friends come to me and say like, how did you find a therapist? Or how did you do this? How did you do that? And like that's really the thing that keeps me going the most is like now I get to be the example. I'm not the what's the word, the liability anymore. Mm-hmm. But then also knowing that in 20 minutes I could turn into the liability again because that shit doesn't go away.
No, never.
You always have to be aware of it. And so that's kind of me to today in terms of mental health.
Shit. Do you know what? It's amazing how much of your story resonates in my story and how we've gone through very, very similar sort of steps to get where we are. And I went through the rugby and eating and drinking. And I never went down the drug route, but that was because I played rugby and got drug tested a lot. And that was the only reason. But it just shows you in a world where we're 1,000 miles apart, but our stories are very similar, and it would be the same to a lot of men. If this can help one person open up, listen to you, and realize, shit, I'm in that same situation, then it's an incredible thing to come out and talk about it and just share. And I'd like to say a massive thank you for sharing your story, mate. It's really passionate, and you've gone through some shit, man, but you've come out strong the other side, and I'm proud of you. And you're smashing it, mate.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that. And like I said, when you talked about doing this podcast, that was why it resonated so well with me as well. And I think I messaged you immediately being like, I'd love to be a part of this because it is something that I'm very passionate about. And, I don't think, I think everyone probably watching who knows me knows that I'm passionate about Newcastle and everything like that. And to be able to kind of have a platform to talk about that with other like-minded people who also suffer the same depression every match week.
Yes.
is really, really nice. But also like, one other thing, and I'm sure you'll agree just by what you've shared is like, like with getting better with sobriety and stuff like that. Like, you always hear these like get sober for your daughter, or like get sober for your wife, or get better for them and stuff like that. And it's like, I don't necessarily like that type of exchange. How I look at it is like, understand yourself so that you can be present for the people that you love. Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah, because for you.
Yeah.
That's what I've always, like, I was the same as you. I did everything for everyone else. When I realized I need to get better for myself before I can be there for them, that's when I realized, shit, do you know what? I need to get better for me first and foremost. Otherwise, if I'm not better and I'm not living, then it's nothing to them anyway.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. Pretty heavy for a Wednesday afternoon for me anyways.
Yeah, for you it's bedtime here soon. But what we're gonna do, we're gonna end it there. And I'm going to say a massive thank you, Shade, for coming on and sharing such a remarkable story, mate. And hopefully you get back over and we can get out on the big market and have a few beers.
I'm looking forward to it, man.
And get on it.
Yeah, I'd love that. Is it like I don't think that anyone should miss a pint of Carlsberg as much as I miss a pint of Carlsberg. But I do.
There's better beers than that. Come on.
I know there is.
You've just let yourself down.
I know there is. But like, that's all I want right now.
You've ruined the podcast.
I live in the craft beer capital of the world, right? Like,
no, that's it. No, at least we can get out now. But when you get back, we're on it. We're gonna go and have a few.
yeah,
We'll get to the match. I'll get you some special tickets in a box, and we'll go and watch Newcastle lose.
Oh, I love it.
That's it, man. But thank you very much for joining me.
That's a plan. Thanks for having me, mate. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Take care.